Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic. What if Banished Naruto became the Emperor of Reality? Part 2. The throne is rising, and the worlds have started to kneel. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's start. Chapter 4, Tournament Arc, Part 1. 2 weeks after Jiraiya and Tsunade arrived in the West. So, brat, Tsunade asked, what are you planning? The Unification War ended nearly a year ago. Naruto said from his position behind his desk, with the usual bunch of clones on either side working on paperwork. I was planning on holding a couple of tournaments to celebrate the anniversary of the unification, a 3-part event consisting of a fighting tournament, one where artists compete and are judged by the spectators to avoid the possibility of bias amongst the judges and to give the people a voice, and lastly one where wandering minstrels and songwriters get a chance to have their voices heard. The first one I can understand, the second one I can understand to an extent, but why the third one? Tsunade asked. Believe it or not, but musicians played a large role in Neji's and my core back in the day, helping keep morale high and even composing a few songs that they liked to sing or hum as we marched from battlefield to battlefield. Naruto told her. And morale is a major factor in any battle. Tsunade nodded. On more than a few occasions, morale is what lead us to victory. Naruto agreed. Those fights literally came down to which side broke first, and my core always held out until I defeated the enemy's commander. Once, one of our minstrels, a young former slave girl we named Mouse due to her quiet voice, even got close to the fighting, then started playing her flute. Don't ask me how it happened, but the sound of her music reached everyone and gave them a second wind. Naruto looked at his hands with a somber smile. Unfortunately, she was struck in the heart by a stray arrow, but that battle was pretty much over at that point. Several battalions who partook in that battle had her name etched into their respective memorial boards in remembrance of her actions and as a reminder that the even smallest of voices can be heard and have the greatest of impacts on any event. Tsunade nodded in acceptance. Even now, Naruto showed that he was still unpredictable. And the second tournament is? She asked. To showcase the art from all over the Yggdrasil Empire and her allies. It is to remind the people about the diversity that can be found throughout the empire. We are, after all, not a singular ethnic or cultural group, but numerous communities, all different from one another, and since most people cannot afford to travel abroad to witness the different cultures, I have decided to bring a part of those cultures here, so my people can see for themselves the variety that can be found in the world, then bring them home for those who couldn't travel. All right, you convinced me, she said, crossing her arms. Naruto nodded as she left him to do his work. Later, council meeting. So, are you thinking of inviting some people from Spring Country? Rimuru asked. Naruto nodded. And also some of the other minor nations of the Eastern continent, yes. He answered. However, since anyone can apply for the tournament and we will be holding prelims a week before the actual tournament begins, which will be in 3 months from now, I am of no doubt that the people from the 5 major nations will try to dig their greedy fingers into the prize pool. That's a given, Izumi Curtis said as she leaned back in her seat. The independent merchant branch I asked to open in the East reported that of the 5 great nations, only Tsuchi and Mizu are economically and financially independent, so I don't think they will send many people to compete. Kase no Kuni, thanks to its geography of being predominantly one huge desert, is financially and economically dependent on trade and the income from the missions for the shinobi, although we have started opening channels with them as per your orders some time ago. Apparently, the merchant council in Kase's capital is against the idea of trading with us through the IMB and are threatening to blacklist their own shinobi from numerous stores and towns if the deal goes through. When their daimyo learned of this, well, our merchants reported that he threatened to hang the representative of his own merchant guild. She gave a sigh. Currently the bottleneck for trade between us lies in the Kase no Kuni's merchant guild and the IMB. They're coming to an agreement on prices and stock choices, with the guild still trying to take the cream of the cake for themselves. Kaminari no Kuni on the other hand has a reasonably stable economy, however their heavy funding of the military has left them pretty cash-strapped as of late. I believe they will send at least 6 of their jonin to participate once they hear word of this tournament. She continued. Including the Raikage and his younger brother, B. Everyone nodded, knowing full well what this meant. Hai no Kuni, where to even begin? Ever since the old hag was ousted last year, the seat of leadership has passed on to some called Danzo Shimura, and I am saying this here and now, please blacklist anyone from that village from partaking in the tournament. For you to ask that, Izumi-chan, then this man must be a piece of work. Makarov spoke up. More so than some of the lads you are usually beating into shape. Naruto snorted. Piece of work is the major understatement of the decade. I don't know much myself, but he is known as the Dark Shinobi, and he used to lead a highly confidential and controversial Black Ops unit known as Root, until Sarutobi Hiruzen ordered the group disbanded. I remember that old man. Sarutobi-san was well respected even at a young age amongst the Uzumaki. I shed a tear when you told us of his passing. Shanks said. I actually met Danzo once when he arrived in Uzushio to negotiate a new trade deal with us, under orders from the third Hokage, he claimed. Turns out, he just wanted us to provide their Anbu with Uzumaki seals, including some of our Kenjutsu, which he shouldn't even have known about since they were sealed away within our own versions of the Scroll of Seals. What kind of Kenjutsu are we talking about? Naruto asked, weary. Ever since he met Shanks and the other surviving Uzumaki, he'd been taking lessons in sealing from some of them and thus knew firsthand just how powerful their seals could be, as in, first-hand experience memories from unfortunate clones. He still wondered why the hell there exists a seal that makes people's hair look and feel like the quills of a porcupine, something that Hinata found out the hard way during her first and only unannounced visit during one of Naruto's Fuinjutsu lessons under Shanks. Loyalty seals, seals that force the bearer to answer any question whilst being placed in a subconscious state, and time death seals that are impossible to detect are just the ones I know about since I only know about them because of my former position as a scribe in the Uzushio Council. He answered. There are rumors that he also asked for access to our library, but that was thankfully turned down. Did they get any of those? Hinata asked. She shuddered, remembering what loyalty seals could do. As far as I know, the only ones we were willing to hand over were loyalty seals, though we gave him a far inferior version since it takes a Grand Sealmaster to apply the complete seal at the base of the tongue. The inferior seal only paralyzes the bearer should they betray the one they are loyal to, not seal away any and all knowledge of their home and fry any and all means of speaking vocally again. Shanks said, looking grim. 6 weeks later we sent our second princess, your mother, to Konoha to be the next host of the Kyuubi. Within a decade, Uzushio fell in the Third War. None of our pleas for help to Konoha were answered. You believe that Danzo may have had a hand in that then? Rimuru asked, hands clasped just underneath his chin and a contemplative frown on his face. Like everyone else on the council, the more he heard about Danzo, the less he thought of him. I wouldn't put it past him. Shanks said. Even back then, he looked at the tree instead of the forest. His sole focus was just to make Konoha great, even if it meant committing genocide on any and all nations and people around them, ally or enemy alike. In just a week before Uzushio was attacked, we caught some of his Root Anbu trying to break into one of our libraries, and we found the very loyalty seal we gave Danzo on his tongue. From him we managed to learn how many other Root Anbu were in Uzushio, and we killed them before they could act out their own missions. Naruto sighed. Regardless, I have already agreed to make it so that anyone can enter. He looked up. However, I have not said anything about people bearing any of these seals, or seals in general, from not being monitored during their stay here in the West. Master Makarov, Rimuru Tem. He looked at the two people mentioned. Can I entrust the two of you with discovering which people bear seals of any kind and have them put under watch? Already found one. Rimuru sassed only for Naruto Snappa, not me you fool. At him, causing the two of them to enter a verbal conflict, whilst the rest of the council drank some of Iroh's tea and snacked on popcorn they brought along for occasions such as this. None of them ever regretted becoming part of this council because it was just so entertaining watching the two friends bicker. Kua, we are not friends. From two bickering friends. Timeskip. The messengers to the minor villages were greeted differently, depending on the village, but all left with friendliness, more or less. Most of these small villages were relatively friendly to their respective envoys, with some of the more hardline villages such as Omegakure, Takigakure and the Natashiko village, giving the envoys a hard greeting, bordering on hostile. However, upon hearing the message that the messengers bore, only Omegakure maintained their hardline attitude, though they became far less hostile. Takigakure actually did a near 180 and offered the messengers many gifts if they would bring their requests for trade to the emperor and signed up for all 3 tournaments. The male member of the envoy group to Nadeshiko actually had to clearly state that he was a married man and an expecting father when some of the kunoichi there requested to duel him for his hand in marriage, simply because they heard that he is a veteran of the recently ended civil war, and thus would bear them strong children. His companion, who happened to be his sister, giggled and told him, "Welcome to my world, bro. Now you know how I feel with all those fanboys." Anyway, Nadeshiko signed up for the first and third tournaments, though their leader, Shizuka, requested a meeting with the emperor, and we all can see where this is going. Now, onto the major villages. Iwagakure, as expected, agreed to participate in all 3 tournaments, though they only sent 3 representatives for each, not counting the group that would come as spectators, or people wanting to gain knowledge on other villages and the empire. The other villages also sent a group such as this, so they won't be mentioned below. In total, their group would end up consisting of some 20 individuals, including contestants. Mizu also agreed to all 3 tournaments, however quite a number of people signed up. Their group consisted of around 30 signees, which was lowered down to 10 in the end, with another 23 spectators, including their cage. Suna didn't sign up for the music tournament, but a troupe of marionette-wielding shinobi signed up for the arts tournament whilst about a dozen signed up for the fighting competition, the cage, Gaara, and his siblings included. In total, this group numbered 32, including participants. Kumo signed up a large number of their shinobi for the first competition, intending to win the prize money for Kumo, and as expected by the Yggdrasil Council, B and A both signed up. They openly admitted that Kumo stood no chance in the other tournaments. Their group numbered around 50 people, 30 of which were people who signed up to fight in the tournament, 5 were the Raikage's guards and the rest were observers whose orders were to spot anything that could help strengthen Kumogakure. And lastly, Konoha. The envoys, Benimaru and Albus, threatened to flatten their defensive wall in large parts of Konoha with extreme firepower and lightning should Danzo try to use his hidden Sharingan on them again or threaten them with anything again. In the end, Danzo agreed to send some people to participate in the first and third tournaments, if only to spy on the Western fighters and the participants of the other villages. Though he was internally swearing to kill these 2 envoys who threatened to cause damage to his great Konoha he had built. As they left Konoha territory heading to one of the IMB's ports, the 2 envoys turned and massacred the root shinobi who had been following them since they left Konoha, with exception to the ones they felt were only loyal to Danzo due to the cursed seal. Those shinobi they captured and brought with them to the west, where one of their Uzumaki seal masters would work to remove those seals with minimal effect on their person. Meanwhile, in Spring Country, Naruto himself was giving the message to Koyuki and her court. The Yggdrasil Empire really likes to spoil us, don't they? Koyuki chuckled, which was mirrored by her council as they knew exactly what she was talking about. In the last year, their country has flourished thanks to their trade agreements with the Yggdrasil Empire. Whilst I can't speak for the shinobi and Yukigakure, I am willing to send some people for the music and the arts tournaments. She winked at her Minister of Arts and Culture, who chuckled. After all, Spring Country's artists and musicians are the most sought after in all of the Eastern continent. And you still have a flair for dramatics, Little Breeze Princess. Naruto sassed. Don't you go all sass on your elders, Naruto. Koyuki snapped at him. Whilst her reputation had caused a gale within the elemental nations, Naruto's reputation as the emperor had caused storms, and he still didn't let her live it down. Elders. Where? Naruto said, dramatically looking around the room as though looking for elders. The samurai guards chuckled quietly at the sight. Whenever Naruto or Hinata came over to visit, they would always end up throwing sass after sass at each other, like a pair of siblings would. Afterwards, Naruto and Koyuki discussed some further trade agreements as well as the possibilities for a cultural exchange program between the elves, Tempest and Yggdrasil, and Spring Country for after the tournament. Turns out that Spring has some nice tea that is well liked amongst Yggdrasil's allies. Time skip. After Naruto returned to the west, he immediately got down to business by starting his morning the same way as always, having Hinata use her magic in the kitchen after sending a generous amount of clones to start with the paperwork. Say, Hinata, what would you say to partaking in the tournaments? Naruto asked. I wouldn't mind partaking in the music one. Might break out my old harp. Haven't played it in a few weeks now. She answered. Unfortunately, you know that my status would cause some bias amongst the population. That is true, how about giving the opening for that tournament? Naruto asked. Tell you what, you participate in the fighting tournament, I'll do the introduction performance for the third tournament. She said with a smile. And maybe I'll make some of that special ramen for your. She purred. Deal. Naruto said, leaning in to give her a kiss when he winced. Something wrong? Hinata asked, seeing the wince. Yeah, my clones just read the roster for the first tournament. Naruto said. Half of Konoha must have put in their name, even the rest of the Konoha 11, as well as other people. Hinata quirked an eyebrow. That doesn't sound so bad. Might be good to see Kiba and Shino again. Naruto sighed. I'll show you the list later. By the way, why did one of your clones disperse? Hinata asked. He made a comment about the two of us and another clone hit him with a letter opener. Naruto said, then groaned as more memories appeared in his head. And now all of them are embroiled in a brawl, are they idiots? But aren't they the same as you? Hinata asked jokingly. Since when were you into calling yourself an idiot? Don't you start with that again, Naruto growled. Or else what? Hinata asked with a cute smirk and a finger on her lower lip. Or else, Naruto's face suddenly got a grin that sent a cold chill up her spine. I'll tickle you until you apologize. Hinata did not last long until she started laughing so hard she couldn't speak. She didn't realize that Naruto had a feather laced with itching powder hidden nearby. Time skip, 3 days before the tournament's preliminary rounds begin. As the first of the ships carrying the people from the elemental nations arrived at the harbor of the small town, most of the visitors were openly criticizing the buildings. I thought that the empire was supposed to be great. Kiba said, looking around, seeing the repairs all over the place. This place looks worse than Konoha did after Orochimaru's invasion 7 years ago. Kiba, watch what you're saying. Ino snapped at him, slapping him over the head. Better listen to Blondie, mate. They and the rest of the Konoha group turned towards the speaker. They saw a tall red-headed man approach them, the 3 scars crossing his right eye giving him a, "don't mess with me," appearance. He was wearing a white shirt which was only buttoned up halfway and a black long coat. He wore worn brown pants that appeared to have been heavily patched and sandals. Strapped to his waist was a saber, with his hand resting on its hilt. Otherwise you can dock right next to the groups from Iwa and Kumo, both of whom are being led by their respective cages. His face then turned less stern. The truth however is that whilst the Emperor is setting aside quite a bit of the annual budget to repairs, the Empire is just so large that many places have yet to start with the repairs, even after a year had passed. And who are you? Kaharu asked, keeping a neutral tone however her face showed that she saw him as beneath her. Your guide, the man said. But you can call me, Akagami, Shanks. One of the Yggdrasil's 2 naval commanders serving the Emperor directly. HN. Still not as high a position as an elite. Sasuke said arrogantly. An elite? Where? I don't see one. Shanks made a show of looking around, which infuriated Sasuke. Right here, you peasant. He roared. I am also the clan head of the all-powerful Uchiha clan. When I look at you, all I see is an orphaned boy who has no right to that title as the real clan heir. Your brother is still alive. Shanks said, narrowing his eyes and releasing some of his haki at the group, making many of them take a step back in shock or fall to their knees in fear. Now, with this minor inconvenience out of the way, shall we head over to the carriages and head over to the imperial capital and get you quartered in? I am sure that you'd like to rest before being given a tour of the city. Several seasick groans were all the answers he needed. As he turned to leave, one of the rude Anbu that served as Danzo's guards tried to sneak away unnoticed. He did manage to sneak away but was unaware that he himself was being shadowed by a member of the Assassin Brotherhood. With the group from Suna. Gaara was one of the unfortunate people who suffered from seasickness, so he barely saw Legolas approach them. Welcome to the Yggdrasil Empire, Lord Cascage and delegates from Wind Country. The elf prince greeted them formally. My name is Legolas Greenleaf too. I will be your guide for the duration of your stay. Gaara, forcing his seasickness aside, returned the greeting and introduced everyone in his delegation. Your reputation precedes you, Lord Cascage. It is rare that a man with a dark past such as yours rises to lead with respect and loyalty, as you do. Legolas said with a smile. With Iwa and Kumo. Iwa and Kumo landed on the same port and were greeted by two elderly people, a giant man who wielded a large naginata and wearing a white coat, and an old man with a gentle visage who was holding a teapot in one hand whilst warming it up using a flame originating from his hand. Greetings, delegations from Iwa and Kumo. The latter greeted the group. Welcome to the Yggdrasil Empire. My name is Iroh, next to me is Admiral Edward, Whitebeard, Newgate. We will be your guides for the duration of your stay. The Tsuchikage, Onoki, strained his back trying to get a look of Whitebeard's face, making him fall to his knees in pain. As A and Kurotsuchi introduced everyone, Whitebeard leaned down and plucked Onoki from the ground, before setting him down on his shoulder. Old men should see eye to eye, shouldn't they? He merely said. Onoki said nothing, 1 because his pride wouldn't allow him to agree, 2 because his back still hurt and 3 because he was actually enjoying the view he had from his perch. Many a Iwa shinobi grumbled about lucky, grouchy old bastards but otherwise kept their jealousy under check. Kumo meanwhile was already being led away by Iroh towards their carriages that would take them first to their hotel where they would be staying and then onwards for a tour of the city. With Kiri and the smaller villages. The delegation from Kiri were met by Master Makarov. Alongside him was his grandson, Laxus, who was a bit late as he was evading his fan club. Fourth Mizukage, Mei Terumi, I presume. Makarov spoke up. Mei nodded. That's me. And you are. Makarov Dreher, current head of the Mages Association of Yggdrasil, guildmaster of the Fairy Tale Guild, and holder of a dozen other titles that none of you would understand. Makarov answered. Suddenly a bolt of lightning struck the ground next to Makarov, making the shinobi tense and ready themselves for battle. Relax everyone. Makarov told them with a sigh. This man is my grandson, Laxus Dreher. This is just his method of evading his fan club. The horror of anybody, I wonder how the Emperor managed to keep his fan club at bay. Laxus grumbled. Maybe you should just ask Mira-chan for help with that. Makarov answered. Because the Emperor has her to keep the fangirls at bay. She will kill me if I ask her. Laxus muttered. What are you talking about? Chojiro asked, voice filled with uncertainty. Oh, just the joys, horrors of fangirls. Makarov and Laxus answered together, before glaring at each other. Anyway, we will be your guides during your stay in Yggdrasil. We hope that you will enjoy your stay. Laxus told them. And for God's sake, please don't get any ideas. I am not available. He directed the last part at Mei, whom he smelled some certain pheromones from. He means that he already has someone he fancies. Makarov said with a smirk. With Nadeshiko. Shizuka and her group from Nadeshiko encountered Naruka, who bluntly greeted them with these words. Greetings, Amazon Brigade from the East. I am Uzumaki Naruka and I will be your guide. Yes, I am a woman and yes, I have been chosen so that none of you get any moronic ideas, such as challenging each and every strong young man you see to a stupid duel for their hand in marriage. Just so we are clear, that shit is not allowed in the tournament, so win or lose, you ain't getting here. So, any questions other than what the hell I am talking about? Boy, there were many of those, all of them about what the hell she was talking about. When would it be possible to make an appointment to meet the Emperor? Shizuka asked. Naruka looked at her for a moment, then sighed. I will see what I can do. Oni-san will be very busy with the tournaments and all that. Oni-san, some of the Nadeshiko Kunoichi asked. He saved my life several years ago and I kinda adopted him as my older brother. Naruka answered with a shrug, omitting a huge chunk of the truth there, but they were better off not knowing anyway. You will understand better once you actually have met him. With the contingent from Spring Country. Koyuki stepped into the carriage assigned to her and came face to face with two old friends. I trust your journey here hasn't been too stressful on you, Koyuki. Oh, you know, the usual, me enjoying the sea breezes whilst my guards all were confined to their cabins with seasickness. She answered with a smile. I hope that you two still remember our deal, so I'd like an update on that. The two others in the carriage gave an awkward laugh whilst blushing a bit. Yeah, about that. Koyuki sighed. Naruto, Hinata, you two are the rulers of the empire, people will be expecting you two to produce an heir soon, and I can't wait to be a godparent, so get on with it already. With the other smaller shinobi villages. All of the smaller shinobi villages were met with high-ranking individuals, though the AIM group, consisting of the Akatsuki and a small group of AIM Jonin, got Izumi Curtis, who grapples Hidan into submission when he attacked her after she insulted his intelligence. Finally, a civilian of all people managed to shut him up. Pay up, Kakuzu said, holding out a hand for the cash that Kisame and Deidara, who both grumbled, handed over. 10 days later, the stadium shook with the roars as people cheered. My people, nearly a year ago, we ended centuries of strife. Naruto said, let these next few days be dedicated to those who made it possible. Another round of cheers greeted his words. Therefore, I proclaim the beginning of the first tournament. The entire city shook with the cheers this time. Chapter 5, Tournament Arc, Part 2. Naruto nodded to the referees to take over as he walked into the shade together with the other contestants, most of whom looked shocked that he would be participating. Before we begin the battles, the first of 4 referees began speaking, quietening the crowd somewhat. Allow us to explain the rules and proceedings for the upcoming battles. She was a tall blonde, brown-eyed woman wearing a dark blue, dark green uniform that many recognized as the uniform of the Civil Services Office. This was Riza Hawkeye, a former soldier who retired when her home country joined the Empire. She was one of the higher-ranked members of the CSO, her role being primarily to train the new recruits in handling firearms, and not shoot themselves as was the case quite often. 1. Killing is prohibited. Should that happen, charges will be pressed according to given circumstances. The second referee said. This was Laxus Dreher, who was not participating because he lost a rock-paper-scissors match against Natsu of all people. Even now, 2 months after said match, Murajan still didn't let him forget it, that damn demon. 2. The initial matches will all take part 4 at a time. The third referee announced, as 4 large squares around the arena floor, including where the referees were standing, rose a couple of feet up. The referee was a red and black themed swordsman who carried a massive sword on his back. His hair was black and he had sharp orange eyes and a wide-brimmed hat. This was Dracul Mahawk, current holder of the title of Strongest Swordsman, and a former pirate who now ran a floating dojo that taught lots of things from swordsmanship to hand-to-hand combat to staff fighting. 3. Each platform will be surrounded by a barrier. However, it is ill-advised for the participants to actively try to destroy said barriers as their main function is to protect the spectators. The fourth referee, Makarov Dreher, said. 4. Crippling injuries, depending on severity, can be considered by the referee as a reason to call the match in favor of the attacker. Riza said. This also means that you will listen to the referee. Failure to do so can lead to expulsion from the entire tournament. As the 4 referees moved to their assigned platforms, a 5th person walked into the middle. In order to break the ice, His Majesty the Emperor has allowed a demonstration match to be held between him and anyone who wishes to test himself against the Guardian of Yggdrasil. The newcomer said. This was Najanda, wearing a form-fitting black army uniform adorned with numerous medals and insignias. Participants of the first tournament are discouraged to volunteer to prevent the possibility of handicap matches. Fuck that, came echoing from the Konoha participants as Sasuke strode forward as if he owned the world. I'll show that I am superior than your fake emperor and that he has no right to sit on my throne. Uchiha, stand down, now, came the call from Torun, one of Danzo's bodyguards. Fu and Danzo had noticed the effect Sasuke's words had on the general populace, who were glaring at the little she, the Uchiha. Danzo meanwhile shook his head with a sigh. Sasuke had always been a handful, even when Tsunade was still Hokage. No, I've been held back enough. I shall show the world that the Uchiha clan is still the most powerful. Sasuke said, flipping him the finger. Next to Danzo, the other cages looked at him with a microgram of pity. You should have kept that one on a tight leash, Hokage. Onoki stated. Unfortunately, he was like that before I took office. Danzo said. More like stole the hat, Darui muttered, lower than anyone could hear. Najanda turned to Naruto, who nodded before unclipping his robe, revealing leather armor covering his upper body, shoulders and waist. On his forearms were long metal braces and he wore similar equipment on his legs. On his hands were armored gauntlets and he wore a sword on his waist. Lastly, his face was still covered by his mask and his hat. Hinata giggled, looking forward the humiliation that was to come, and because the guards behind her were taking bets on how many moves Naruto would need to defeat Sasuke. As Naruto and Sasuke faced each other from across the platform, Najanda stood between them. You two have heard the rules. Your Majesty, you ready? She asked. Naruto nodded. Participant Uchiha, are you ready? Najinda asked. Sasuke grunted, arms crossed. Okay then, fight. Najinda said before jumping back. You should just give, Sasuke said, before noticing that the Emperor was no longer standing before him. No, he was sitting and sipping tea. You spend so much time talking nonsense that I had enough time to brew some tea. Naruto told him. Seriously, you are so slow that it's no wonder why you can't regrow your clan. Your partner must have gotten bored of you by the time you got going. You dare, Sasuke roared as he charged the Emperor, who dodged him with ease, still sipping his tea without spilling a drop. Is that all? Naruto asked, getting bored. Is this really all the so-called strongest is capable of? Shut up and die, Sasuke roared, before sending a fireball at Naruto, who simply swatted it away using his teaspoon, and a generous amount of chakra. Honestly, Naruto began speaking, getting everyone's attention. I am surprised you have made it this far in life, the end will be quick. I shall give you the honor that it will be an Eastern technique that I have been taught that I will use to defeat you. Just die already, Sasuke said, feinting and sending a punch at the Emperor, only to phase right through him, an after image. Hidden taijutsu ugi, Naruto said, appearing behind Sasuke with his hands in a tiger sign. Sasuke saw the next few minutes in painful slow motion. He was familiar with the technique he instinctively knew was coming. Senin Garashi. Naruto sent Sasuke crashing through the barrier, screaming. Everyone in the stadium winced, a few from past trauma of having been on the receiving end of that technique, whilst others winced from seeing Sasuke break through the barrier. However, the majority winced because of the sound that came out of Sasuke's mouth had no business coming out of a male's mouth. Winner, His Majesty the Emperor. Najinda announced. And someone go fetch that young man an ice pack. Shortly afterwards. Now that we are back to where we need to be, let's decide the matchups. Najinda announced as a covered box was brought to her. She put her hand under the cover and grabbed 2 slips of paper after making a show of mixing the contents. Can Chojuro from Kurigakure and Berserker, Naruka please go to platform 1? Najinda called out, before repeating the previous process 3 more times. Omoi and Temari were sent to platform 2, Gimli son of Gloin and the Kiri non-wielding the Kabutowari were sent to platform 3, and Guy and one of the Iwa Jonin went to platform 4. I apologize in advance, but I am no good at writing multiple prolonged battles, so the battles as such won't be highly detailed, but I will do my best nonetheless. Also, I have compiled a list of combatants and literally rolled a couple of dice to make the matchups to ensure some form of randomness. Platform 1. Chojuro and Naruka looked at each other, Naruka giving him a blank stare whilst Chojuro was busy keeping his nerves under control. Naruka suddenly snapped, making the poor mist swordsman nearly literally jumped out of his shoes. You're so tense it is annoying. I can't help it, he said. Both of you ready? Riza asked. Naruka nodded whilst Chojuro gave a hesitant one. Then, fight. Chojuro immediately jumped backwards, and was grateful for it when Naruka appeared where he had stood, a golden gauntlet with long sharp claws on her hands that he had not seen before, the ground shattered under her golden gauntlet-clad fist. Where did those come from? Chojuro wondered, looking at said gauntlets, seeing the equally golden spikes claws on them. Next thing he knew, he was dodging the claws that shot out together with chains, trying to ensnare him. Haramakare Kaiho, he shouted, his sword glowing blue as the bandages shredded. At the same time, he battered away all 8 chains that were heading for him. Behind you, chum, he suddenly heard behind him, and twitched. She, was all he said before 2 more chains appeared and wrapped him up. Before he could utter another word, he was lifted up and slammed into the ground, head first, multiple times. With one final throw, she buried him in the hard platform. His lower body, still visible above the ground, twitched sporadically. When he didn't move any more than that, Naruka crouched down next to him and began poking him with a stick that she pulled out of her cleavage. Naruto still wonders, why the hell she carries a stick there and what else she hides in there since he saw her pull out something akin to a baseball bat from there, then a complete first aid kit, then a stuffed teddy bear and lastly that what she was actually looking for. A bottle of strong sake, which she used to disinfect some poor bugger's wounds. Gramps, I think he's out. She commented. Couldn't you have held back even a bit? Riza asked. No. His twitching pissed me off. She answered. Twitchy bastard would jump at each and every mouse that scurries along his path. Riza sighed before proclaiming Naruka as the winner. Meanwhile, in the stands, Mei Terumi sighed at seeing her aide defeated with relative ease. He was a good fighter, but only once his blood got going and he got his confidence together, which took longer than what his opponent gave him. Something tells me that this will be a trend for the fighters from the West, Onoki, the Tsuchikage, said, before looking at Platform 4, where his Jonin was currently getting handed to him by someone who was easily one of the foremost taijutsu masters in the entirety of the Eastern lands. Platform 2. Laxus looked at the two contestants, simply nodded, and told them, well, get on with it. I'll intervene when things go too far. The heck is that supposed to mean? The wielder of the Kabutowari asked. I mean, how can someone as short as shit? He screamed as Gimli's twin-headed battle axe cut a deep groove into the hard ground where he stood and subsequently followed up with sharp and powerful swings from his backup when that axe got stuck. Never underestimate a dwarf, Gimli said, blocking a strike from the shinobi, only for his current weapon to be cut in two when the Kiri Nin slammed the hammer portion of his weapon onto the back of the cleaver axe. Interesting, Gimli said as he delivered a strong punch into the Kiri Nin's face, sending him reeling back, and weak. Was added as he walked over to his prized battle axe and wrenched it out. Weak. My weapon just destroyed yours. The Kiri Nin said. Only because I hadn't known about the limitations to that weapon of yours. Gimli said, gripping his axe with both hands and charging forward. Sparks flew as the two bladed weapons collided, but before the hammer could connect, Gimli disengaged and watched as the Kiri Nin sent his cleaver axe deep into the ground, getting lodged in the process. Next thing he knew, the Kiri Nin had the sharp blade of Gimli's axe at his throat. Winner, Gimli, son of Gloin. Laxus declared. How? The ground should have been destroyed by my weapon. He said. My people have helped create these platforms. They are made from a special mortar that is hard yet can be easily pierced or cut. We use it ourselves in our own training fields since it is easier to repair since we just pour in some more of the mortar instead of having to fill in entire craters. Gimli explained, helping the Kiri Nin to dislodge his weapon from the ground. On the downside, if things like this happen, it's a pain to get the weapons out. Platform 3. Temari and Omoi looked at each other, each going over what they knew of the other. Omoi knew that Temari was a long-range wind specialist with a habit of just about sending anyone flying whom she believes is hitting on her. He also knew that he could negate her advantage of range somewhat thanks to the restrictions of the platform. Temari on the other hand only knew that Omoi was a close-range melee fighter who uses predominantly lightning attacks. Theoretically, if she maintained her distance, she should hold the advantage. Are the two of you ready? Mihawk asked. Neither contestant nodded, too focused on the opponent to hear him. Sighing, he looked at Naruto, who threw him an alarm clock set to go off in 15 seconds. What do I do with this? Mihawk asked, before reading the note attached to the clock. Chuck this between them, then get out of the barrier. So he did, and 5 seconds later was glad that he did because it exploded with a loud bang. Fortunately for everyone else in the arena, the sound was all but nullified by the barrier around the platform and all they saw was a small burst of smoke and two shinobi who were on the ground clutching their heads. Now that you two are paying attention, you can begin whenever you want. He said, getting nods from the two combatants once they recovered. Omoi immediately charged Temari, who jumped back and began gliding on her fan, but he followed her, charging his sword with electricity that he sent at Temari, who blocked it with a wall of wind. Nice try, Temari said with a smirk. You will have to move faster than that, slowpoke. This from someone who once lost to a lazy guy. Omoi asked, making Temari flinch. Shikamaru saw the flinch and muttered that Omoi had just made a big mistake. Something that both Gaara and Kankuro mirrored. Sure enough, Omoi found himself hard-pressed when Temari decided to go on the offensive. Don't you dare bring that up, you bastard. Temari growled, and Omoi realized that he should have maybe kept his mouth shut for once. Only to begin his usual conversation listing every worst-case scenario he could think of, giving Temari enough time to close her fan, get in close, and begin beating the crap out of him. Off to the side, Karui and Samui sighed and face-palmed in well-experienced unison as Temari sent Omoi into unconscious oblivion until Mihawk stopped her, proclaiming her the winner. Platform 4. Guy and the Iwa Jonin glared at each other. Despite not being at war with each other or having had any direct conflict with each other since the Third Great Shinobi War, however, this animosity was deeply ingrained from decades of warfare between the two nations. "The two of you ready?" Makarov asked. When both nodded, he called, "Then, begin." Flame of Youth. Guy roared, rushing his opponent, who leapt back in an attempt to make space whilst going through hand signs. "Doten. Domu," he said as his skin turned near black. The moment he landed, he was grateful that he knew that technique, because he felt Guy's kick that connected with his chin. As he flipped over, he used the momentum to try and kick Guy in return. Both fighters landed in a heap, but quickly got back to their feet. They continued to trade blows until Guy managed to subtly lead his opponent into a corner before opening the first gate and delivering a series of lightning strikes that sent the Iwa Jonin flying off the platform. Winner by ring out, Might Guy of Konoha. Makarov announced before watching Guy approach the Iwa Jonin, who was getting back to his feet. "That was a most youthful fight. Let's have another one when circumstances allow it," he said loudly, holding out a hand. "I'd rather not," his opponent said, taking the hand and pulling himself up. "If it weren't for my jutsu, I am sure that my neck would be broken by now, to say nothing of the rest of my bones that you punched and kicked. Or you could just sit down and have a beer," Makarov said, making both of them jump as they had not realized that he had moved up right next to him. "What a youthful idea, little old man," Guy boomed. Meanwhile, up in the stands, Onoki was shaking his head at the madness that was going on down below, the madness known as Konoha and Iwa Shinobi getting along over something as insignificant as a drink. A few minutes later, Naruto rejoined Hinata in their booth where she rewarded his victory with a long kiss, thankfully hidden by the fly netting that had been put up whilst the first round of fights were going on. "Did you enjoy defeating him?" she asked. "I was honestly expecting more of a fight, goes to show just how strong we have become since arriving in the West," he answered. "And is it just me, or is that your little sis over there, being approached by that one pickup artist?" She turned and saw that it was indeed Hanabi and that she was indeed next pickup artist, one whom she recognized. "Oh no, he doesn't," she said and rushed out of the room, pausing when Naruto called over to her. "You going to kill them?" he asked. "Nah, just give them a lesson they'll never forget," she said, before motioning two of their guards to follow her. Naruto sighed, before turning his attention back to the fights, where the next set of fighters were being drawn by Najinda. The second set of fighters are Uchiha Sasuke of Konoha vs. Chapter 6. Irina Akashira, you're welcome. I hope that you also enjoy this one. Reads 22, thanks. Dilo 2651. I am hopefully in my final year in university, so I can't write as much. I will write when I can though. Perseus 12. Glad you liked it. Haikyuu Safari 2. I hope that the match here meets your standard. Darth 56. Many thanks for your support. Avatar Uzumaki. Glad you liked those parts. As much fun as it would be to see the blind bandit kicking peoples, neither Avatar Last Airbender nor Legend of Korra are amongst the series one use in this story. Kirisuan. What can I say, it's a classic from the Naruto canon. Gotta appreciate the classics, right? Mr. Bumpity, thanks man. I appreciate the help. On with the story. Previously, on Naruto in the West. Naruto rejoined Hinata in their booth where she rewarded his victory with a long kiss, thankfully hidden by the fly netting that had been put up whilst the first round of fights were going on. "Did you enjoy defeating him?" she asked. "I was honestly expecting more of a fight, goes to show just how strong we have become since arriving in the West," he answered. "And is it just me, or is that your little sis over there, being approached by that one pickup artist?" She turned and saw that it was indeed Hanabi and that she was indeed next pickup artist, one whom she recognized. "Oh no, he doesn't," she said and rushed out of the room, pausing when Naruto called over to her. "You going to kill them?" he asked. "Nah, just give them a lesson they'll never forget," she said, before motioning two of their guards to follow her. Naruto sighed, before turning his attention back to the fights, where the next set of fighters were being drawn by Najinda. The second set of fighters are Uchiha Sasuke of Konoha vs. Chapter 6, Tournament Part 3. I from Kumo. Najinda announced. Would both combatants please head over to the first arena? She then drew another set of papers. Gray Fullbuster and Izumi Curtis, please head over to Arena 2. Najinda announced. Izumi walked over to her position, confidence clear by her stride alone. Gray, not so much, he hoped that he would remain conscious enough to witness the rest of the fights. Mifune of Tetsu and Lord Orochi of the Samurai Order, please go to Arena 3. Najinda called out. Mifune was an old man wearing old samurai armor, with long gray hair and an equally long beard. Orochi was a middle-aged man with midnight black hair, cut short, and a neat goatee. 1. Natsu Dragneel and Akayuki of Nadeshiko, please go over to Arena 4. Najinda called out. I'm fired up. Natsu yelled as he sprinted over to the arena, his opponent taking her time to walk over instead. Let the second round of matches be. Najinda was interrupted by a shrill scream coming from the audience. 5 minutes earlier, Hanabi sighed, trying her best to ignore the advances of the not-so-gentleman next to her. She was on her way back from buying a drink for herself and her friend, Moegi, when the guy walked up to her and began lavishing her in praises, with another equally not-so-gentlemanly pickup artist doing the same to Moegi. Why did it have to be me? She asked herself as the guy started throwing a new set of compliments at her. Look, I am not interested, so. At least let me try to change your mind, oh beautiful mountain flower. He interrupted her. Why is she being so difficult? She is almost as stubborn as the Empress, back before she got married to that little punk who became the Emperor, lucky prick. Hanabi's response was interrupted by someone clearing their throat behind them. I'd appreciate it if you had heeded my warning from all those years ago, Mr. Unable to score with the ladies. Hanabi, Moegi and the two pickup artists turned, the former's face brightening upon seeing who it was, the second one cocking an eyebrow since she seemed to recognize the woman who had spoken, and the latter two paling, before the second pickup artist disappeared as fast as he could, the first however frozen in fear, remembering her threat from back then. Short flashback, 3 months before Hinata and Naruto's marriage. I swear, Hinata said, holding the pickup artist's throat with one hand, whilst holding a rusty hatchet in the other. If I find you hitting on another girl in my presence or line of sight again, I'll have your balls removed and fed to the dogs. Flashback end. The pickup artist still had nightmares of that day. Do I know you? He asked, trying to feign ignorance. Not me personally, no. Hinata answered, before motioning one of her guards forward. But I believe that the two of you will be well acquainted after this. The guard took of her helmet, revealing shoulder-length white hair and emerald green eyes. Sir Cyrilla Fiona Ellen Rhiannon, 2, by order from the Empress, you are free to deliver just punishment on this person. Hinata said in a clear voice. Siri grinned whilst the poor man slunk away, only to be grabbed by Hanabi and Moegi. What's the matter? Hanabi asked in a cutesy voice. I thought you wanted to spend time with a pretty lady. Moegi added, unable to keep a smirk from her face. Here is one trying to spend some quality time with you now. If possible, the man paled even further. Siri had a reputation for having never failed to hospitalize each and every playboy, pickup artists, thug, thief and rapist that crossed her path, except for maybe the very first, because he allegedly was never heard from again. All she ever said about that one was, a specialist took care of him. And now, he was in her crosshairs, so he did the only thing that he could think of, scream like a little bitch for help and mercy. Back in the arenas. As I was about to say before that man, woman interrupted, let the matches begin. Najinda announced as though nothing weird had happened. Arena 1. Sasuke glared at Ai, who huffed and appeared to not take this seriously. You will lose this battle, old man. Sasuke growled as he called upon his chakra. If you intend to bore me to death, then yes. I said, riling Sasuke up, to great effect. With a roar, Sasuke charged in, Chidori chirping as he intended to finish it quickly. Only to be blindsided by Ai, who caught his hand in a lightning-clad hand of his own, neutralizing Sasuke's lightning. Trying to use a lightning jutsu against the undisputed master of lighting users in all of the elemental nations, you have some guts. I grunted. Maybe you aren't as weak as your match against the Emperor made you to appear. That jutsu managed to nick my skin. Sasuke growled as he tried to kick Ai, only for him to catch that as well, before surprising Ai by firing a point-blank, full-powered fireball into his face. Sasuke smirked, thinking he had gotten him. "You little shit," I roared as Sasuke suddenly found himself being thrown through the air and out of the arena bounds. "You singed my beard. Do you have any idea how long it takes for the smell of burnt hair to disappear?" The smoke cleared to reveal I standing there in his full-body Raiden no Yoroi, with the tip of his goatee singed black. "Winner by ring out, I from Kumogakure," Riza announced, whilst Sasuke, furious at the loss and at the fact that his sneak attack did so little damage, stomped away, swearing vengeance for this humiliation. While he was walking, he overheard some of the civilians say, "That Uchiha guy, his combo was excellent." Indeed, his opponent, whilst clearly far more experienced than him, was still caught off guard and failed to get that defensive technique of his up in time. A second civilian said, "It helped ease Sasuke's anger somewhat, but not enough to care." Arena 2. Laxus felt a pint of sympathy at the brutal beatdown that was happening in front of him. Gray had started out by coating the entire floor in ice before sending several icicles at his opponent, one of the few people with whom Laxus has a good relationship with, and still is scared shitless of, reason being that his attacks were rendered useless when she transmuted the damn ground she was standing on into lightning rods, then proceeded to do to him what she was currently doing to Gray. Clapping her hands, Izumi transmuted the ice and ground she was standing on into a wall that protected her from the projectiles, and clamping his feet and lower legs in transmuted granite. "The hell?" Gray asked, then realized that Izumi had closed the distance between them. "Rule number 1. Never give your opponent the chance to fight back," she said, then proceeded to literally tie Gray's arms and legs into some strange semblance of a human Gordian knot. "Rule number 2. Shut up. I am still speaking," Izumi shouted at Gray, who was roaring in pain. "Winner by tying her opponent up, literally, Izumi Curtis," Laxus announced. "Now, please untie him. He got tied up by a housewife, he should be able to untie himself," Izumi called out, earning many cheers and confirmations from the crowd. Arena 3. The battle between the two samurai was, for a lack of a better term, a deadly dance, graceful in its fluidity, strong in its movements and deadly should either one of the contestants make a single mistake. Mifune and Orochi were trading, dodging and parrying the other's blows before, at some unknown signal, both jumped back and both caught their breath, with the biggest smiles on their faces that anyone had ever seen. "It has been many decades since I have faced an opponent such as yourself," Mifune said. "Likewise, is what I would like to say," Orochi answered. "Unfortunately, I last faced someone of your caliber just over a year ago. I was just beginning to get used to the piece." Nearby, Mihawk was grinning. He enjoyed it when swordsmen spoke to each other truthfully and with respect. He gained some respect for the Eastern Samurai because he himself knew just how strong Orochi was. He considered Orochi to be one of the top 50 swordsmen in the West. He could safely say that Mifune was Orochi's equal, despite their age difference. Soon, the two samurai resumed their deadly dance, sparks flew as their blades connected, and then just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped, with Mifune's sword a hair's breadth away from Orochi's neck, whilst Orochi's sword pointing at a gap he had cut into Mifune's armor, where his kidneys were located. "Guess we tie," Mifune said, with Orochi nodding in agreement as both withdrew their swords in unison and sheathed them, giving each other a bow of respect. As the two of them bowed to each other, Mihawk announced, "Since the rules do not take into account a draw, I have no idea how to proceed. The verdict shall be given after the other fights have been resolved." Arena 4. Akayuki looked at Natsu, trying to gauge his overall capabilities. From his outward appearance, she estimated him to be a physically fit specimen of a man, and she just realized what she had been thinking, which tinted her face a rosy pink. "Well, then, you may begin when ready," Makarov said, before stepping to the side. "Why do you smell so funny? Are you on your period?" Natsu asked. "Yes, wait, what?" Akayuki turned bright red, before charging Natsu. Die. Her charge came to a screeching halt when she saw Natsu engulf his hands in flames, her instinct shrieking at her not to get hit by those flames. "What now? I've been waiting for you to come charge and so we could brawl it out, but you just stop." Natsu groaned. "But I am a little girl," Akayuki said, giving him her best attempt at the puppy eye jutsu. "Don't you know it is bad manners to hit a lady with fire and flames?" Lizanna and Lucy both said something about that some time ago, Natsu said, apparently thinking, his flames dispersing. Inwardly, Akayuki was smirking in victory, until what Natsu said next shattered all her preconceptions about him. But they never said anything about fire and flame and lighting, he said with a blinding smile as his whole body was consumed by fire and lighting. Thunder flame dragons roar, Natsu bellowed as a typhoon of fire and lighting sent her flying into the barrier. Winner by ring out, Natsu Dragneel. Makarov announced. Wendy, can you heal her up? Coming, master. A young blue-haired girl ran up. She arrived to see Akayuki crying her heart out. What the hell is with the people in this land? I want to go home, she cried. There. Natsu-ni was just being himself. Wendy counseled her as she began healing her injuries. What the hell is he though? And are you his sister? Why would he go all out in a spar, especially with a girl like me? Akayuki continued. Natsu and I are not siblings, but he is a brother all the same. Wendy said with a smile. And he was actually going easy on you. And it doesn't matter to him whom he fights, he never backs down from a fight, except for maybe his two girlfriends and Urza-san, and Master Makarov. Akayuki wanted to deny reality right then, but couldn't. Fuck this shit, I am so gonna stay away from the West, forever. She thought to herself. Even if they have some crazy hot people here, even if they would dare to hit a lady, Kami, where have I gone wrong in life? With the other contestants. Despite her fellow Nadeshiko Kunoichi's defeat, Shizuka couldn't help but smile. I should have sent her here earlier. She said. Why's that? Naruka asked from her seat next to her. Akayuki is an oddball amongst Nadeshiko Kunoichi. Shizuka answered. She strongly believes in the Nadeshiko way of only allowing stronger men to marry her and all that, but at the same time, she also believes that men aren't supposed to hit women. At least be glad that she fought in a tournament then. Naruka said. 'Cause should she have joined us during the Civil War, she'd be dead by now. Speaking from experience, Shizuka asked. I only joined Oni-san later, but even the handful of battles I partook in were brutal to say the least. Trust me when I say this, but war has no place for simplistic, gender superiority bullshit mentally, gentleman shit believing types like her. Naruka pulled back the strap on her shoulder to reveal a scar running over her shoulder. I got this during my first battle here in the West. Bastard got me good with that halberd of his, gouged out a good chunk there. If it weren't for the blue-haired Pip's coup, little sis tending to your comrade there, I'd have lost my arm. What was she doing on the battlefield? Shizuka asked, pointing at Wendy. She's stronger than she looks. Despite her size and age, if she gets serious, there are very few amongst the contestants here who can hold their own against her, myself included. She is truly a master of the winds. Naruka said with a smile. Unlike the rest of her brothers, she actually uses her head instead of her fists. Brothers? Shizuka asked. People like Natsu. Beat the shit out of you first, ask questions later types, all of them. Naruka explained. Probably why I get along with them so well. Back in the arena. Now that this round is complete, we have met an impasse. Mihawk announced. Since the match between Lord Orochi and Lord Mifune ended in a draw, it is time to decide who continues to the next round. For that decision, the Emperor has ordered me to leave the decision up to you spectators. Loud roars and shouts for both contestants erupted from the stands as people began chanting both Mifune and Orochi's name. You know what? At Mihawk's words, the cheers stopped dead. Let's just let both of them through to the next round for a three-way cause, otherwise you lot will just keep chanting until the day is over. Mihawk said. They have shown that they both deserve to be in the next round after all. Agreed. Naruto called out, which was mirrored by many of the spectators. Najinda stepped forward again to draw names. Samui of Kumo and Monkey D. Luffy, please head over to Arena 1. She called out. Shizuka of Nadeshiko and Inazuka Kiba from Konoha, please go to Arena 2. B from Kumo and Nubari 3 from Kiri, please go to Arena 3. Legolas Greenleaf of the Elves and Tetsu from Tetsu, please go to Arena 4. Najinda called out the last match for the round. Arena 1. Shishishi. This should be fun. Never fought against a warrior from the east before. Luffy said. Likewise. Samui answered in a near apathetic voice. Thank the log he's not looking at my chest. Then immediately became irked when she saw his neck stretch and corkscrew, all the while looking at her. Arena 2. Let's go, Akamaru, let's show this bitch who is the alpha. Kiba said, with Akamaru barking in response. What do you mean I have a death wish? Hashtag bark hash. Are you kidding me? Kiba turned pale. If I win, I'll be. We have an agreement with the West that rule doesn't apply here. Shizuka said. Besides, you are not the type of person whom I'd consider in the first place, as I already am looking for someone else. Who? Kiba asked, sighing in relief. The student of the Gamma Sennin. Shizuka answered. He made a pact with my sensei that their students would finish their duel at a later stage. With Naruto. Naruto turned to Jiraiya, who was pointedly looking elsewhere whilst whistling. What did you do? He asked. I may or may not have snuck into Nadeshiko to do some research about 20 years ago. Jiraiya confessed after Tsunade leveled a frosty glare at him. The leader of the time caught up to me after I had made my escape and challenged me to a duel for her hand in marriage. Despite not taking it seriously, we were evenly matched and destroyed a large part of the forest around us when I called of the match in favor of letting our students finish it. In other words, you didn't want to be bogged down by a marriage, despite being in your utopia. Tsunade asked. Guilty as charged. Jiraiya answered. This was back when I was still trying to garner your favor, before you and Dan became an item. And you didn't think about telling me this when you were teaching me? Naruto asked in a calm tone. It may have slipped my mind, Jiraiya answered weakly. He looked underneath the calm tone, and wished he hadn't. You realize that should Shizuka request a battle with me for my hand in marriage, Hinata is going to neuter you, right? Naruto asked. Arena 3. I fly through the wind and sting like a bee. Shut the fuck up before I give you the iron claw. I roared at his brother's bad raps. Only for Nubari to start rapping as well, resulting in him and B having a rap battle, complete with funky hand motions and rap dancing. Oh gods, there are two of them now. Karui and Omoi both whined whilst I was being restrained from delivering a double iron claw. Arena 4. At the neck and under the arms, Legolas said. Huh, Tetsu exclaimed. What do you mean? Your armor is weak at the neck and under the arms. Legolas answered. I have fought against beasts that had the same weaknesses in their own armor. Back with Najinda. Let the battles begin. Najinda called out to the cheers of the crowd. Part 2 ends here, but the real domination has just begun. If you enjoyed this chapter, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Fox Fanfiction. Comment, Emperor Part 3 inches if you're ready to see Naruto claim his first queens and shake the multiverse.